We would like to begin discussion 3 since it is time.
Shimazono-san, please. Now we would like to begin round table number 3, so please take your seats. The third round table will focus on our future and action plan. We have looked at the past. Certainly we cannot talk about the future unless we look at the problems past and present. So even as we cast our eyes to the future, we would like to also continue to reflect on the past. At least I believe that will be the course of discussions in this roundtable. So our speakers are the representative from the Japan Nuclear Disaster Aid Association. So this group assists with long-term migration or short-term recuperation. And I believe that this association is responsible for contacting other groups nationwide for these activities. Takanori Hayao will be representing that group. And then we have another speaker, doctor from Fukushima, Dr. Yasuyuki Taneichi from the Ikeda Memorial Hospital. So let me first turn it over to Ms. Hayao-san.
I am from 311 Ukeire, and I am the co-representative of this organization. I have distributed 3 different brochures that pertains to our activities, 2 in color print and another one in black and white. These are actually brochures, leaflets that will be published soon. We actually just completed printing them, and we will be distributing this in the disaster-affected area. I was hoping that I'll have the actual final print of this to show it to you, but unfortunately, we couldn't do so. At the end of my presentation, I also would like to talk about an event that will take place next week in Koriyama. But actually, I have also the 2 brochures and invitation documents for this event that I've distributed to you. So I'd like to begin my presentation. I'd like to begin with a self-introduction. I myself have evacuated because of the accident. I've experienced that the March 11th in Miyagi and fled afterwards with my child, and I went through various stages of, and finally I have decided to settle myself in Yamanashi, in Kofu, in Yamanashi Prefecture that I have never been to previously, but thanks to various connections, I have come to decide to settle in Yamanashi. It's been 3 years that I'm settled in Yamanashi. In Yamanashi, actually, there are other evacuees and people who've migrated not only from Fukushima, but also from Miyagi, and also from a wide area of Kanto. We were quite numerous, and there are people who are arriving as we speak. Next month, we will be welcoming a new family from Fukushima, and we always have new people coming in from Kanto area. Also, recuperation camps. We are holding recuperation camps in Yamanashi Prefecture. So all the way from Hokkaido in the north to Okinawa in the south, there are recuperation camps and areas that welcome people for recuperation. There are organizations everywhere, and we have created a network where we work together and we share information. That's what we do at 311 Ukeire Network. We have mainly two pillars of activities, which is recuperation in one and migration two. When we were to aim for a complete protection from radiation, we need to physically remove ourselves from the contaminated area. Of course, there are various activities, mental health care, the food testing, decontamination. So in this way, there are various different kind of activities, and we are aware of that. But in our case, we are focusing on these two pillars of evacuation and relocation, recuperation and evacuation. So physically separating ourselves from the contamination, because radiation and radioactivity is unavoidable. And as long as we cannot really completely remove ourselves from the situation at within the disaster affected area, we need to move away. So recuperation or temporary retreats and evacuation. I myself evacuated, so I think that's the best option. But I also know the reality that that's not necessarily always possible or easy. So then there is something we can do still to use our holidays and times off to spend some time outside of that area. Maybe perhaps that is not a sufficient amount of time, but at least we can provide some time where um, there is no radiation contamination and where it is safe for children to play. And maybe having spent some time in that kind of safe area, these people might make the final decision to move away and evacuate. It's not, we're not making it, we're not forcing them to move away or evacuate. There are some organizations within Japan that provides 1 month temporary retreats and recuperation. Our aim is to provide as long as possible the time where people can be away from contamination, and we're working together with various organizations. So this is private organizations and non-governmental organizations network. We have been discussing for the past 2 days that it's the government's initial responsibility to provide such safety, but that is not being done. Because of the inaction of the governments and municipalities, such retreats are not provided. And in reality, retreats and evacuation has been supported by private organization in a voluntary manner ever since March 11th. So private organizations taking actions, whereas governments are continuing with their safety campaign, claiming that evacuation is not necessary. And in fact, they are trying to minimize such movement of people. That has been the policy and stance of the government. And up until now, we have discussed this matter as well. But it's as if people who evacuate or people who participate in temporary retreats are over anxious people oversensitive, taking their own actions. That has been the stance of the government and municipalities, and in fact, they have been trying to put impediments into our efforts. This has been the case since 2011, since right after the accident. Of course, such situation is not desirable. The fact that the private organizations are taking the leadership is might not be desirable, but that's an inevitable situation. In ideally, everyone in the disaster affected regions should be provided the necessary support, be it recuperation or evacuation, that should be provided as a public support in order to provide a full support in a fair manner, in an equal manner. uh, the governments or public entities must take that initiative and use public money to do so. And there have been voices claiming that and asking for the government to take that responsibility, be it litigation or be it other groups who are calling for such action. And some groups are asking for such measures taken by schools, etc. And I think that's the right way of thinking, but governments or public entities are unwilling to take that responsibility. Litigation is time consuming, and the effect might be quite limited, sadly. So, therefore, the private organizations are taking the place of the government to undertake such activities. They know very well that that is a primary responsibility of the government, but meanwhile, people are irradiated and faced with contamination. So that's why they need to do what needs to be done. Some of our members are a very small entity, perhaps with just one person who's active and who actually is willing to accept families from Fukushima and other areas who want to uh, move away for a temporary period. Large members within our network can accept hundreds of children during summer vacations, hundreds or perhaps 200 in any way. And they receive people from not only from Fukushima but from Miyagi and other Tohoku regions. They receive as many children as possible from disaster-affected area. And indeed, from the sender's side, there are so many families, so many hundreds of families who would like to send their children to such camps. It's been over 3 years, and almost actually four. It's the fourth years that I have been participating in this activity, and now we are facing with funding issues. And in terms of human resources, we are struggling as well. We need to have quite a lot of staff members to help us run such recuperation camp. And people get tired as well. And also, it's difficult to completely manage and the entire network of our member organizations. But I feel that there are somewhat decreasing number of members. We are not public entity. We are not all organizations have to be part of our network. So we do not know the whole situation. But it seems that there seems to be somewhat decreasing number of these voluntary organizations participating in such activities. Again, what's important is that this is a voluntary activity, and so I do not know in reality how many organizations are undertaking similar activities in Japan, and I don't know what the true scale of their activities are. We don't have such data. Often I get questions from the media, but I cannot answer their question.
I have already covered this page to a certain degree. At any rate, we are JNDAA, aka 311 Uke Zenkoku, to accept evacuees. There are many activities, but there are mainly two categories. One is the retreat camp, the other is relocation. These two are the major two areas, but in addition to that, there are many areas we conducted activities. For example, one of them is camping in the summer vacation or spring vacation where we focus on children. Sometimes only children go to the camps, and sometimes the parents can accompany with their children. Although it's called camp, but then it's not limited to only the outside activities. Sometimes we do such type of traditional concept of camping, but then we just want to take our children where there's no worry of contamination, and then they can refresh themselves psychologically and physically. Therefore, speaking of retreat, there are many forms of activities, and now we don't limit ourselves in terms of timing because we'd like to open ourselves for anyone who wants to have our activity services. For example, there's a building like a share house, and then three families or four families can enjoy activities together. Depending on the request of those families, they can stay 1 week or 1 month because we have the standing establishment for those accommodations. From the viewpoint of nuclear free, it cannot be classified as a retreat per se because of the timing issue. However, because of the time limitation, the location limitations, sometimes compared to Hamadoli, Nakadoli, contamination exists in Kanto area, and some of the organizations recognize them and they believe it cannot be the place for retreat. However, most important is to refresh ourselves psychologically. Sometimes families or people cannot go as far as Kyushu or Okinawa for such reasons as work and school, and those people can take a retreat only in Kanto area. Still, we'd like to provide a retreat to refresh themselves. And then mother-child evacuation, meaning that the fathers cannot leave the the places, but the mothers and the children want to take some retreat, and they don't see what will happen in the future. And sometimes they have to go back to their hometowns for some reasons. This is a tentative location. However, still they worry about exposure and radiation. Therefore, although it may be only mothers and children who can take a retreat, we'd like to provide a safe place where mothers and children can refresh themselves. That is a mother-child evacuation. This is a tentative, and because they are imposed to have dual living, therefore, financially, it might be difficult for some families, especially at this time of the year, because it's not the emergency evacuation. Those who will relocate from now on might have determined to relocate to live in different places. Though this is my personal impression, already more than 3 years have passed after 3/11, and I believe they have struggled quite a lot and they have weighed many options available to them, and now they've determined to relocate to set up a new household. And then once they resettle, we provide support to make them integrate into the society or new communities. And in addition to ourselves, there are some member organizations who provide support to prevent those relocated families from being isolated from the receiving communities. Because this is an unfamiliar place for families who moved from Fukushima Prefecture. Therefore, the very basic knowledge necessary for the living, such as the location of the supermarket, the location of the schools, and so on and so forth. And these supporting organizations provide such a very basic information necessary for the living food for those families. Of course, the school or education related information is very important for families who have a child. We also have a chit chat meeting where the people can enjoy really casual conversations. For example, my activity area is concentrated on the Yamanashi area, but those who want to join us, anyone can do this regardless of where you are. I'm quite familiar to Yamanashi area, therefore I can provide many information about Yamanashi, and then some other organizations can do that in Yamanashi, and then we can give the sense of reassurance to people who evacuated from Fukushima area. For example, Happy Island, the organization, is one of the members of Keiwa Zenkoku, JNDAA. They have conducted their activities in the affected areas, including consultation meetings. This is a list of some of our activities. For instance, we ask the member organization to organize consultation meetings in the affected areas. For example, we will have such kind of consultation meetings in Koreama, and then the member organizations distribute flyers to let people know those events. More than 10 organizations have joined our Zenkoku, including the ones in Iwaki City, Koreama City, as well as Nasu Shiobara in Tochigi, as well as the organizations in Miyagi Prefecture. They are really community oriented to provide this support to those who relocate and hosting communities and sending communities. They have to have a good communication to provide integrated support to the affected people because we need to capture the needs and the demands of those who evacuated as accurate as possible. Then I have covered the first bullet point and the second bullet point as our activities, and then the third bullet point is financial restoration as one of the private sector groups. Therefore, we established a fund for retreat. There are other similar activities for operate retreat facilities, and we try to provide financial support as much as possible. Of course, we don't have a deep pocket, therefore, our financial support is very limited. Therefore, we wonder whether there are any generous person with compassion who are very happy to provide us with 100 million or 300 million, but there's no such good thing happens. At any rate, we have to recognize that there is the finite financial resources. Although we try to share those finite resources as much as possible to support the activities, especially for retreat facilities. among many local governments. There are some who provided the public support to accept evacuees by providing or by offering the public officers' dormitories as a shelters for those relocated. And of course, we have provided support for such local governments. And then, as you see in the second bullet point from the bottom, that's what we call mobile classrooms. Though the number is very small at this moment of time, still we'd like to cover as wide populations as possible to provide the education support. But sometimes in the receiving communities, they may find difficulties to find the connections, and that is where we come in as a coordinator. We can serve as a bridge for those who want to provide support but cannot find a good place, and those who want to do the practical work and not to find the places. And we can serve as a coordinator. At any rate, in order to provide more systematic support, we've determined to establish this nationwide network of supporting organizations, JNDAA. Then we have the new meeting named the Nationwide Gathering for Life and Hope. Those who want to relocate from the affected area, we will have a consultation meeting on the 29th of November. Nationwide means that 30 or more than 30 organizations get together from Hokkaido, northern part of Japan, to the Okinawa area, to the southernmost part of the island. We will have such a consultation on the 29th of November, and on the following day of 30th November, supporting communities and receiving communities can get together to learn each other. At the same time, they can discuss how they can develop future activities, because there may be some areas where they can join their forces, and there may be better ways to provide support. In order to explore those possibilities, we will have a kind of network meeting with related organizations on the 30th of November. We have spent 2 years after the official inception of our organization, and we have reviewed our organizational structure, because it's a really good timing for us to review what we have done, as well as its significance, limitations, achievements, failures, and success stories. After 2 years, therefore, we'd like to review ourselves of what went well and what did not go well, and then we can make the other step forward. Right now, decontamination work is yet to be completed, meaning that we don't see the end. And we are suffering from a kind of support fatigue right now. And in that sense, it's really good for us to review our work in the past and for the future. And it will give us further energy and insights for another 2 years. And of course, the situation will change in the future. To be frank with you, how much control it will happen over the turmoil after 3/11 and people accident, and there may be some change in the situation as the situation changes. The needs and the demands of the affected people will change, and we have to respond to those ever-changing demands and needs. That's why we have to review. Thank you very much, Mr. Hayao. We have to follow the long way forward, and I do hope that your activities will be persistent to cover that the long voyage. If the government of Japan or local administrations supported you, it would be really good, but then it's not happen, and it's too good to be real. That's why you have to stand up on your feet. In addition to that, those who evacuated from affected areas and those who are working on the retreat, there are many stakeholders on this room. Therefore, I'd like to ask for your opinions after the completion of the session 3.
Our second speaker is orthopedist Dr. Yasuyuki Taneichi. He is also doing the echo screening on thyroids for Fukushima prefectural residents. The thyroid echo screening is being worked on by many medical personnel, and they are being trained currently on the echo screening effort. So we'd like to ask Dr. Tanich to speak about that as well. So I'm an orthopedic surgeon. When it comes to pediatric thyroid echo screening, there were no specialists. So in a way, it was almost as if anybody could have done it. However, they needed a certain level of precision. So they decided to hold training sessions for doctors within the prefecture, and that's how I became involved. And just to speak about my background, so very briefly, I was 46 years old at the time of the disaster, and at that time I had 3 daughters, ages 4, 8, 12, and 1 wife. At that time, I had an orthopedic clinic in Koriyama City, my own practice at that time, but I wanted to move my children to a safe area. So I closed my clinic in February of next year. I am currently working as an orthopedic surgeon at Ikeda Memorial Hospital in Sukagawa City. As a physician from the affected area, I have been involved in discussions with area residents regarding the risk of radioactive contamination. I've also taken part in health consultation sessions. In order to respond to the need from citizens, I've conducted voluntary thyroid ultrasound examinations since July 2012. I am now certified by the independent examiner for the Fukushima Health Management Survey Center, and I also participate in off-site thyroid screenings. I found out after the earthquake that in Japan they had REMAT, the Radiation Emergency Medical Assistance Team, and this was a sub-organization of the NIRS. This was organized to support overseas accidents. So it was stipulated that they would work in concert with the IAEA at accident sites. In Japan, the safety myth had prevailed, so they had assumed that there would never assumed that an accident would occur in Japan. REMAT was actually established to support accidents in overseas sites. However, ironically, the first accident that they dealt with was in Japan. REMAT's commanding headquarters and then has a dispatch team and logistical support team. And you can see on the slide how their functions are distributed. In the TEPCO nuclear power plant accident, there was a great deal of confusion as this was a multifold disaster with an earthquake and tsunami, so they were not able to do a proper assessment of the initial phases. REMAT was dispatched on March 13th. The prefectural medical university was in complete confusion at that time. They were giving out commands at the nuclear accident site. However, they were not able to take initial assessments. As a matter of fact, they may have taken assessments, but they never actually stepped outside to take it. It is also rumored that they refrained from doing detailed tests in order to prevent unfounded rumors. However, as you are all aware, this has now had a serious impact on the condition of the thyroid glands of the residents. This is a document that came up in the Parliament Investigative Committee. The work at the site was to be done, and the screening level was set to 13,000 CPM at 4:20 on April 13th. However, due to remet, the criteria was raised to 100,000. However, if the screening was 13,000 CPM, then that would correspond to a thyroid equivalent dose of about 100 millisieverts. So it suggested that it should be maintained at 13,000. However, Fukushima persisted in using 100,000 as the criteria. Based on local voices, at 14:14 on March 14th, the screening level was recommended to be raised to 100,000 CPM. And at the same time, there was a remark made that iodine tablets should be handed out for those who exceeded 100,000 CPM. However, that recommendation never reached the front line. So with that said, we are now conducting health exams for our residents. And we have been commissioned by the prefecture to attempt to eliminate anxiety among the residents about health and health management, given the radioactive contamination in the prefecture. So the Fukushima Health Management Survey has been established based on that. There was much criticism later on that came about. So we attempted to detect and begin early treatment of diseases. So the purpose was changed to that based on criticism that was raised. The FHMS is based on a basic survey and also a detailed survey. The detailed survey will include thyroid screenings, comprehensive health check, a mental health check, and lifestyle survey, as well as a survey on pregnant women. And in the Fukushima Prefecture Health Coordination Council, there were also secret meetings that were held. It has come to light that these secret meetings were being held before the Oversight Committee. They have said that there was no such thing. However, when we look at the thyroid cancer incidence age of children in Chernobyl, there appears to be a difference in the age, because in Chernobyl, it was 4 years after the accident in which the thyroid cancer became prevalent. There have been 103 cases of thyroid gland cancer in children. The Fukushima Health Management System appears to be headed in a direction that it was not originally intended to go. The test is supposed to be given once every 2 years until the age of 20. However, even the duration of that interval has no clear basis. Prior to the accident, thyroid cancer was a very rare disease, and there was not a great deal of knowledge about this disease. And the testing was set up with help from experts. We do not believe that this will have continued support from doctors outside of Fukushima, so we will need to make this supported by Fukushima doctors. Training sessions have started in March. However, the first accreditation session was held in December of 2012. If you were to attend 3 training sessions given by Fukushima Medical University and then another session, then that would give you the qualification. This was left entirely up to the doctor. However,
the medical university will make the final decision on who will give the screening. Unless the general physician is allowed to give these screenings, we believe that it will not be possible to establish trust with the residents. Every 3 months, the results have been shared with the Health Oversight Committee. In the 16th Prefectural Oversight Committee held on August 24th, 2014, this is the latest. And in the latest, there were 104 cases of cancer or suspected cases of cancer. The 11 cases on which there were operations held have been identified as benign. Suzuki Shinichi said in October that there may have been a claim that there was overtreatment or excessive procedure. Suzuki said that many cases of cancer has been discovered due to excessive screening. This is not due to the effects of radiation. If the many cases of thyroid cancer are the effects of overscreening, then we are detecting thyroid cancer cases which would not have been detected unless for the overscreening. So this is the epidemiological point of view. He was asked to present information to support that. And again, this remark was made at the 16th meeting. However, I do not believe that further information has been disclosed. As a part of the Fukushima Prefecture Health Survey, there is a baseline for when there was no radiation present. And the premise is that there should not be any cases of child thyroid cancer. Therefore, there's a view that thyroid cancer cases are being detected unnecessarily, meaning that this could be considered excessive screening, amounting to excessive treatment. And some say that this is actually a bigger risk for children in Fukushima. So based on that, there is still an argument raging that these screenings should be abandoned entirely. However, here's somebody who did not attend the 16th committee. He is the vice chairman, Shimizu Shuji. On October 10th, he made a remark to Asahi Paper. He said that as one of the residents, he said it was impossible that the health effects of radiation exposure by the nuclear accident should not be studied in a survey of residents. Residents would not be convinced if they were simply having their health monitored. Radiation exposure is a fact that needs to be followed up closely so that the effects can be clarified. To say that the effects are unknown is by itself stressful for residents. The ambiguity will create anxiety. Regarding excessive treatment, he said that even if there is exposure to the thyroid of radiation, no matter what the dose is, then because of the anxiety of the parents, there is no choice but to continue the screening. If there is excessive diagnosis occurring, then that is simply another aspect of the damage inflicted by the TEPCO Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant issue. So this is a point that Iwata-san made earlier, and I completely agree with that point.
By the way, Mr. Suzuki, at the Japan Society of Clinical Oncology on August 28, 2014, he said that the 45 of 54 cases had a tumor diameter of 10 millimeter or larger or metastasis to the lymph nodes or other organs needed. And among those with metastasis, 2 cases had lung metastasis. 7 of the remaining 9 cases had tumors close to the trachea. And these facts show that the cancer cases are not considered either overdiagnosis or overtreatment. However, regarding the individual cases, because of the protection of the personal information, the information was not released. And because of the 2 cases with a lung metastasis, it seems like we should not be talking about screening effect, but we too should undertake further tests. if there is a proper treatment undertaking, pediatric cancer and thyroid cancers will not treat itself. Now, if I may summarize what Suzuki-san is saying, he is saying that the pediatric thyroid cancers that are being detected currently are due to the screening effect rather than the radiation effect. He's also saying that surgeries are conducted on patients with indications for surgery, and thus the cases operate on are not considered overtreatment. So, on the 16th result, I'd like to talk about a bit about the results. As for the radiation effect, we will not be talking about that in my presentation. So this is called the latest data, but some of the cases are being treated. So the data here is as of June 30th, 2014. Of the over 2,000 people, 2,237 people, 103 cases has been determined, which means that the 286 people's results are sorry, 389 secondary examination subjects had unconfirmed results. Also, anticipated number of cancer patients when thyroid ultrasound examination is finished on about 290,000 children. So if we get the total results of the 290,000, then we can expect 126 patients. The anticipated number of patients, which is in total 360,000. So if all 360,000 had been tested and had the results are available, then we can say that we can expect 157 patients approximately. Now, if you look at the documents of the the Fukushima Health Management Survey Organization Committee's document, they have detected 51 cases in age group 16 to 18. So 86.9% are already examined between the age 0 to 15, but between 16 and 18, that ratio is only 51%. The fact that only half of the 16 to 18-year-olds have been tested, but already 51 cases of cancers has been detected. Within the 100,000 patients, if we calculate the incidence rate, between 16 and 18, we have a very high result of 185 people, which is a very high incident rate. We cannot compare directly, but before screening tests, that number was about 2 in every 100,000, so which means this is 900 times higher. As the age grows older, the incidence rate of thyroid cancer would increase. That was what was considered, but this is much, much higher. So if we think about it in that way, maybe then there will be Professor Tsuda who will be complaining about. But moving forward, when we consider the age difference, if we are to calculate the anticipated number of cancer patients in age 16 to 18 at the time of the accident, and if we, based on the hypothesis that 700,000 people have been tested, we can expect 121 patients approximately. Total, approximately 195 patients could be detected overall. Currently, if you don't have the final answer regarding the impact of the radiation, we should be focusing more on protecting the young people's health. 195 people is not the total number. It's and we now know that there is a highest incident rate between age 16 and 18, but yet the participation rate to the survey is only 51%. And about 60 malign and suspicious cases are anticipated between the age 16 and 18. And at least 30 people need to have receive operation, and 1 to 2 people might have experienced metastasis as well. So now we should not focus on whether this is an impact of radiation, but we should focus on the early initial preliminary screening of the 32,000 people who are unexamined. So So early detection, early screening, and early treatment is what I like to request. And also, I'd like them to think about concrete measures, how to improve the participation rate. I think that should be the role of the oversight committee. Medical people and medical organizations should release all information possible unless it pertains directly to the personal information. They should not deny any possibilities. And without denial, based on facts, and with disclosure of all the information to allow for evaluation by a third party, they should emphasize on the lack of the radiation effect. And so, in that sense, we need to assemble proofs that the Professor Suzuki's saying of overtreatment does not stand. We need to be aware of the need. Thanks to this event, we were able to realize the need to protect Fukushima's children. There must be some lessons learned for the future. But if we continue the same path, there is a high chance that we will not end up with any lessons whatsoever. So therefore, what we need to do is to rebuild the trust with the people of Fukushima so that we can increase the participation rate to the survey and shorten the intervals between the surveys. And we should not deny any possibilities of cancers or effect of the radiation and to continue our effect. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Dr. Taneichi. We had presentations in two different areas, but they both talked about what to do next. And these areas require us to think about the future plans. Now, I'd like to ask questions to Dr. Taneichi and proceed our discussions. That's how we like to proceed. And then we would like to gradually expand the questions and debate topic. Is that okay with you? Professor Dr. Tsuda, I believe that you've been quite involved in the Fukushima Health Management Survey. So looking forward for your comment as well. Your opinion, please. Will you focus at the end that the oversight committee should be focusing on certain matters and that they are actually not working on these matters that they should be tackling, increasing the participation rate, and that's not enough, so they would need to take various measures like the notes and lists or whatever ways possible to keep record, just like the way it is done in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and provide incentives so people will continue participating. And also, the cancer registration or registry should also be utilized simultaneously so that people outside of the prefecture can be tracked as well. And other than that, we should have other type of system and registry for non-cancerous diseases as well. Health issues will occur, so then the regional insurance schemes and healthcare schemes should be utilized to accumulate the data on diseases. And the data analysis should be undertaken perhaps not by the Fukushima Medical University, but we should gather international experts, share the data with these international experts to analyze the data. And at the same time, we need to continue updating the latest data to take concrete measures. As for the costs, as much as possible, we try to find the cheapest way to undertake these measures. And furthermore, we have to find a way so as not to financially burden the residents and also try to minimize the radiation as well. I think that's what we need. Anyway, if we continue talking about less than 100 millisievert, there is no impact to health or no cancers caused. That has to be denied in the first place. And also, the WHO's 2013 report clearly indicates about the leukemia and thyroid cancer and breast cancers and other solid cancers. That clear fact, that should be clear conclusion, has to be communicated, and we have to use that data and to see if the actual incidence rate goes over that or not in order to undertake the reverse dose reconstruction. So that kind of repeated efforts must be undertaken in the future going forward. That's my opinion. So in any case, the Japanese situation that we are faced with is really a big challenge for us for risk communication. That's all. Thank you. Professor Tani, do you have any comment? Well, actually, I have a question to Dr. Tsuda. You earlier said that based on the law on food safety, there is a obligation to screen foods. Regarding radiation substances, does that law apply? Well, the law on food safety, actually the article number 58 indicates, well, actually, you can look at the law by yourself. You can read it by yourself on the internet. But that Article 58 stipulates the obligation of the designated authority to check the food safety, and that has to be communicated to the prefectural authority, and that has to be communicated upwards to the national government and to the Ministry of Health, and that is an obligation that is stated here, and according to the various rules and regulations that pertains to food security and food safety and food poisoning countermeasures. So all these related regulations and rules indicate the precise measures that need to be taken by different authorities in this case, in case of food, the radiation issue as well. But when you look at the labor, the health standards, health and sanitation, they don't have clearly stipulate or express the obligation. They say that it may. May is the verb that they're using rather than they must or they should. So that is why, in terms of any clear ways to undertake or detect screening on foods, they don't talk about that either. So that is what's happening. So I I know two of the actual acts regarding nuclear power, and none of them talk about clear method regarding food screening in case of a radiation risk. They don't even talk about the possibility of a screening either. So there's a discrepancy between the laws regarding food safety versus other types of laws and acts. Considering the current level of understanding we have and knowledge we have, it is possible to have quite a detailed screening, and it's quite possible to have a quite a detailed level of regulations because currently nothing is undertaken. So a very concrete measure for screening is necessary. So I repeat, there is quite a detailed stipulation if you look at the Act on Food Safety.
Rider to exclude radioactive substances, you mean food sanitation law? If you talk about food sanitation law, it defines that food means any substances taken by human beings. However, medications stipulated under the Pharmaceutical Affairs Law, which stipulates the quasi-drugs and drugs such as Ripobitan D. This is a tonic, and this is excluded from the application, and these quasi-drugs and drugs are stipulated by the Pharmaceutical Affairs Law, or PAL in short. In this case, for instance, the radiation load to the thyroid glands is caused by the inhalation exposure as well as the oral exposure. These are two delivery they do routes. According to the WHO, you can see two routes and you can see the percentage between them. As to the oral exposure, this is under the food sanitation law. That means if doctor determines that this thyroid cancer is caused by the oral intake of iodine, and there is a suspicion about that, and if the doctor makes such diagnosis, and then based on the food sanitation law, that doctor is obliged to make a report. This because this is a shall clause, and survey must be conducted because there is a shall clause stipulated under the food sanitation law. So we can use this as an our ammunition, right? If a doctor identifies the thyroid cause and if there is a suspicion that cannot be denied, upon that point, the doctor has to make a report to the health office, and with that report, health office shall conduct survey. If report is not made by the doctor, that doctor will be fined the maximum, the sentence of 1 year prison imprisonment. So this food sanitation is a law is wonderful to ensure the safety of foods. Therefore, if some negligence happens, that doctor is subject to the imprisonment not more than 1 year, and there are a financial fine. I don't think the amount is huge. Still, such a penalty is imposed onto the doctor for his or her negligence, and it's stipulated under the food sanitation law. So if there's a suspicion with the thyroid cancer caused by the potential the oral exposure, then the doctor is obliged to make the report to the health office of that community. I have carefully listened to your discussions throughout the day, and now what saddens me is that the nuclear accident child victims support law is not used in our intended way. Actually, it's used for the promotion of the distorted ideas, totally opposite to the idea or intention of the nuclear accident child victims support law. So now this law comes to be a kind of naughty child doing just opposite to what we intended. Then we have to consider in which way we need to pursue our happiness and welfare, and equitable support should be provided by the government of Japan. But that's not happened. Therefore, we have to provide support for the government and those who determine to leave their hometowns, or those who determine to remain in their hometowns, or evacuees may see the opportunities to go back to their hometowns, and there are problems for return. Whichever directions the decisions are made, for example, those who determine to leave their hometowns, they have to think about parents' care, schools, and jobs, and those who determine to remain in hometowns, they have to consider how they get the monitoring on their health through screening, for instance, and there must be the assurance for the right to get such a screening, and then we can provide the assurance for welfare and happiness, and that's what the government of Japan should have done in our idea. However, the government of Japan has focused on only for a certain population, meaning that those who remain has been prioritized by the government, while those who leave hometowns, they are kind of ignored by the government, and then in order to provide only the convenient supports for those for those the government wants to provide support. They have enacted the law to support nuclear accident children victims. However, if this law is used in our intended way, it can be effective. In addition to that, this law will be helpful for the future enforcement regulations. Therefore, I want to ask you to read this law to support nuclear accident child victims, and I hope Mr. Kawasaki adds some information, because this law is not limited to only the thyroid cancer patients. What I have said for a long time is that why screening, for instance, for ordinary people, For example, the thyroid cancer screening start with the blood work usually. However, sorry, the usual examination start with blood work. However, for the cancer screening start with the echographic examination. And if blood work, blood examination is provided, then the non-cancer abnormalities such as physiological lab abnormalities can be detected. And that's why I have insisted that the blood work should be provided during examination. Blood examination, such an overall health checkup should be provided to the victims. And then we can monitor overall health status without being limited to only the thyroid cancer, and there is no such description in any laws. In addition to that, that law for all of the diseases, regardless of the exposure, then the government of Japan has to assume the burden of proof that there is no impact from the radiation exposure. And all of the tabs should be picked up by the government of Japan. And actually, it's stipulated in the law. And with that understanding, I want you to evoke this law if applicable. So please understand the intention of the law to support the nuclear accident child victims. Dr. Hayashi said many difficulties he faced with in order to promote, to eliminate those problems. This law was enacted, especially for us, those who are determined to leave the hometowns, which must be really difficult. I know that the government of Japan lodged the long-term law. However, right now the use of this law is really distorted, and it's really chagrin for me because it's totally different from the original well-willing this law. That's why I have to ask you to collaborate with me to ensure the appropriate enforcement of this law. And we cannot do this in our country alone. Therefore, we have to garner the international support to ensure the health of all of the human beings. So then we have to ask for international cooperation, and any expertise is derived from those cooperation. We have to disseminate and share the information. Belarus and Ukraine, for instance, these areas have many expertises after the Chernobyl accident, and there is a government level agreement that's concluded to share information. However, the problem is that this agreement does not have a valid effectiveness. It's not enforced. Therefore, please try to use this law in an intended way. Thank you very much, Mr. Hayao and Dr. Taneichi. Your presentations combined the law to support the nuclear accident child victims, support the spirit of this law must be re-energized if we practice or implement what you said. However, at this moment of time, at the Environment Ministry, the way to manage the health of Fukushima people after the Fukushima Daiichi accident, there was an expert meeting held. And instead of expanding the health monitoring, health checkups, actually, the discussion has moved on to cut down the examinations. And it's a really disturbing fact for us. So we have to keep our watchful eyes on the government of Japan. And whenever necessary, we have to lodge the lobbying activities against them. Sorry for talking about private matters because I have to excuse myself at 5:30 to catch my flight. Therefore, I'd like to deliver my conclusive remark. So, by the way, first of all, sorry for getting so emotional because I'm a voluntary evacuee. Therefore, before such thing happens, before being a voluntary evacuee, there was a call coming from the clinical psychotherapist, and then I was told exactly the same thing as you mentioned at this meeting. 3 years have passed, but nothing has changed. It's really strange, and because the law to support nuclear accident child victims support child victims There was no budget. That's why. Therefore, this law was denacred. However, there's no special law was enacted, and that special act got the huge budget, and Fukushima Medical University was appointed to serve as a core hospital to provide screening and medical checkups. The subject age for the medical checkups should be expanded, especially we have to get more high school students covered under the screening, and this should be the intention of the special act. And there is no reason, as far as I'm concerned, to find for the government not to implement this special act. There was an announcement the other day, therefore I don't have to mention it right now, but this second round and the third round of thyroid cancer screening is conducted, then you see the result. Actually, though it's really abbreviated, but there was no presentations made at the medical conference. I cannot say any more than that, but expert doctors at the medical conference had scrutinized the related fact, and they have to make a proposal based on their scientific findings. Thyroid cancer cannot increase only among pediatricians. If the number of cancer patients among children increases, then other populations have to see the increase of thyroid cancers. For instance, as Mr. Yamashita mentioned, if there is a possibility of developing thyroid cancer, then the thyroid cancer screening should cover the people up until their 40s. In addition to that, we should not forget the medical checkups for the elderly, because if we want to be proud of ourselves as the longest longevity country across the world, we have to take such an appropriate action. And that is the way we have to tackle the situation. With Mr. Yokota, we had a discussion about a retreat. Retreat means that people can feel refreshed with easygoing feelings. However, it's difficult for children in Fukushima to enjoy such retreating or refreshing activities, unfortunately. Therefore, I'd like to take this opportunity to appeal this. That is, in the summer in 2011, there was a retreat in Rome, and the seats were taken up immediately. As this episode represents, people needed new experiences. For example, the students of the Tokyo University, which is the most prestigious university in Japan, has taught me English or has taught me the science, and the native speaker has taught me the English that are so attractive. And those who have to prepare for the entrance examination for the university, and if they wanted to study, then there's no reason for parents or anyone to oppose it. Of course, retreat is retreat. However, something extra can be added to the retreat activities. Sorry for asking this, but then if you give us, ensure the budget, financial resources, because the budget for the law of nuclear accident child victims support is too small. Therefore, that's why I want to ask for your support and assistance. Sometimes the same child has taken the opportunities more than one times. However, we have to open up this kind of opportunities as many children as possible, include that is the exercise of the split of the law of nuclear accident child victims. Even when the government of Japan does not pay any, does not support financially at all for this law, but we have to do this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Konta. Together with Dr. Taneshi, I am in Fukushima, and I've been doing the thyroid screenings. I actually went through one training session, and the children in the affected areas, compared to children in areas where there is less contamination, I get the feeling that they're different. It hasn't been announced yet, but my feeling is that we really need to keep monitoring the situation because we may find Fukushima following in the footsteps of Belarus. In the prefectural residence health exam, when the mothers go to a screening and nobody tells them anything, then they feel like they're ignored. I was told that they often go to other hospitals looking for a second opinion. But if there are many anomalies, and I know that it's not possible for me to say right there on the spot that everything is okay. So I took a writing test and I did a practical test, and now I'm doing on-the-job training. So with regards to the thyroid gland screening, which is a part of the FHMS, I think that they're actually being very thorough. I'm also a Fukushima resident, and I think I'm in favor of keeping a health records book for every individual, but then I also feel like maybe I'd be treated like a guinea pig. But when I talked to doctors in Ukraine and Belarus, I knew that keeping records was also very important. So if you go to a different prefecture and you're screened, then hiding those results is actually not good. I and I called the session given by the Medical Association of Fukushima a brainwashing session, but people are concerned that going outside and exercising would lead to irradiation, so they keep children in the house and then they are given video games to play with. Also, in the temporary housing districts for evacuees, they don't go outside. So when they come in for a clinical visit, I see that they are putting on weight. So it's not just thyroid gland cancer. Compared to the harms of cesium, I think that a lot of other diseases, including hardening of the arteries, is occurring before my eyes because if you lead a sedentary lifestyle, then you will certainly incur a disease. And I think that that is going to happen. As I am still in the prefecture, I think that we all need to put our heads together to figure out how best to lead our lives. Everybody here is concerned about the health of the children and also of the adults, not just in Fukushima, but in the other areas. So the fact that we have this gathering of people who are concerned for the health of everyone, I think is very encouraging. I see that some people in the back seats have also raised their hands. I'd like to give the opportunity to some others outside of the roundtable to speak, but I'll turn it over to Iwata-san first. So when you think about radiation, some people have already been exposed to radiation, or some people are being continuously exposed to radiation. And in many cases, the discussion is centered around the health issues to date. We talked about the law and rights in terms of radiation protection. Of course, people have a right to receive medical treatment for their protection. So that is definitely a right that should be guaranteed. But there are redundant rights, and then also the right to avoid that should also be guaranteed. The right to migrate should also be guaranteed. But I would actually like to ask this question of Kawasaki-san. So, through your activities of doing these retreats or even resettling, the special law on child victims is not really functioning as designed. But do you have any thoughts in terms of what we should be looking at doing in the future? So, yes, this is Kawasaki speaking. Thank you very much for your consideration. I think you're giving me the opportunity to speak because I haven't yet spoken in the roundtable. So I've been saying that it is an integral part of human rights to have the right to avoid radiation, and I am more an academic. I'm not an expert on law, but I certainly can relate to that. Now, I don't know if that is something that will be guaranteed by the Constitution. We had a discussion with some constitutional experts, but right now we've kind of skipped that step. And even though it's a little bit ambiguous, we have created a foothold to guarantee that right in the special law for child victims in 2012. But even if you say that it's an integral part of human rights, that doesn't mean that it will automatically be guaranteed. Because people have a right to assets, and of course, there's a right to expression, and these are always threatened. These are internationally established rights, but they are yet constantly threatened. We must always do battle to try to protect these rights. At the same time, there should be a right to avoid radiation exposure. I think that we have managed to take a step forward with a special law for child victims, but that doesn't automatically mean that it will happen. So, what can we do in the practical world in order for there to be some concrete measures? In the second round table, I'm actually still bothered by that because what we heard from Dr. Taneichi or what Suga-san said yesterday, I wanted Dr. Akiyama to be able to listen to that so that we could talk about what to do based on that. If we see an argument in roundtable 2, then he ends up leaving. So that creates division. I think that we have perhaps a consensus within this gathering, but if you look at the overall framework of authority in Japan, then the camp that we are in is definitely the minority. We are a minority by a big margin. So what exactly can we do? I think it's very challenging for us. And I am struck by this thought, but despite that, I'm really hoping that we can find a way to overcome that, but it's just really difficult for me to make any kind of a statement that will help. So I realize I'm kind of all over the place, but in order for us to realize specific rights, we need to work with the legal system, we need to work with society. I think that we have to figure out how to create connections with different layers of society, with people in different positions. So I think, this sounds just like my general impression of what has taken place, but I'd like to close my comments for now. I think that this session was about the future and action plan. And I think that means that we need to make the discussion as positive as possible. We've heard often how the special law on child victims isn't really functioning and how the emphasis is really on reconstruction and reassurance right now. And given that tandem, it is difficult for me to not be pessimistic. However, as I try to think about things that we can do in the 311J and DAA network, I've been trying to figure out what the network can and should do, what we should aim to do with the network. It's now the second year since we established the network. We've been trying to develop our organization. We've been producing new brochures, and there was a discussion about what we should be aiming to do. Because in very broad terms, this network was about aiming for a common goal. So it might be recuperation or it might be better support for people who wish to resettle elsewhere. Chance brought us together, and it was more of a voluntary gathering of people who wanted to give assistance so that people could be better off. But is that really appropriate? If we really want to be a nationwide network, then we should try to encompass as many groups as possible so that we're actually covering and touching every organization in the country so that we can be bigger and we collect more information from different organizations. And we're taking action against the government or against others to promote our views and to take concrete action so that we become a bigger collective force. And we're starting to hear that more and more. I'm not sure if we will actually be able to get there, but our 311 network, we are focused just on handling what's in front of us, not necessarily on changing the law. We want to get more experience in the recuperation area. We want to keep the momentum going for those who wish to resettle. So as we accumulate more experience, then perhaps there's a way to change the direction of policies. Maybe there will be a change of direction, or maybe there's a way for our activities to expand, to spread. Maybe in the near future or even later on, if the situation changes, and when the situation changes, it might actually change for the worse because we may start to see some very obvious health damage, even though I don't want to say that. I think that the urge to resettle seems to be waning, but perhaps it will flare up again. And when that happens, our 311 network may have a role that society really wants. So we are bearing that in mind as we continue our activities.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have 3 people raising their hands. Ms. Nakamura-san and Yoshida-san. Ms. Yoshida, who has been participating in Chernobyl-related activity. But first of all, Nakamura-san, I am from Fukuoka. In 1986, we had the Chernobyl accident. And at the time, the USSR government did not issue information, but 3 years later, around 89, we started to see the flow of information. And mothers started to ask for help that their children were getting sick. So 4 years later, 4 years after the accident, we started undertaking support activities. And I myself started participating 6 years after the accident in 1992. Echo instruments, echo screening instruments, and also support related to children and patients who have undergone thyroid surgery. I have gone there to provide with the screening instruments as well as the hormone tablets. And I also met someone whose name was Natasha, who was a mother of 2 children, a boy had a thyroid cancer that moved to lung and lost his life. So through such encounter, I felt strongly that the establishment of early screening and early detection is important. So we actually donated a car that allowed for screening, and also in 1992 we started the activity. I started the activity, and we have seen that we have also started the recuperation activity in 1992. And we have been providing recuperation camps for over 200 people. And I have been hearing Dr. Taneichi's presentation and felt strongly that that kind of experience from Chernobyl is not used in Fukushima. But what's really important is the expansion of the screening. But on the contrary, we are seeing the waning effort and decreasing effort of screening. And that's ironic. And also regarding migration or evacuation, relocation. Well, I myself is a head of a company right now, and I'm wondering if a company head, someone can, entrepreneur, can be part of such efforts. So I am calling on my colleagues, friends, and other entrepreneurs to see if we can do something together for support. There are many people actually who want to do something for the victims. Even today in the symposium, we have experts, professors, doctors from Japan and from abroad. And if I make effort to communicate what you are saying to my colleagues and people around me, and that is a really great help. When people decide to relocate themselves, there are various hurdles and difficulties they face. One of the major issue is the financial issue. A financial issue is related to work, their jobs. If my colleagues, my entrepreneurs, and heads of companies can do something in providing them of new job, that's a possibility. And also, Hayao-san, you said that if you receive 100 million yen from the government, then you can do a lot more activities. That kind of level of budget, money, is important, and we need to find a way to fund these kind of needs. That's what we are talking as well among um, the people around me. And a lot of questions that I get is how many people are willing to relocate? How many people are wishing to relocate? And in a way, there is a lot of people who secretly want to relocate and evacuate if all the conditions are met. But just because they don't see the possibility or the realistic possibility of relocating themselves, they don't even voice their desire. Even if they talk about relocation with the family, then they will feel even better if they are unsuccessful in relocating themselves. So that's why they just keep their mouths shut. I participated in today's discussion, and I felt that it would be very good if many of you who are here today who made presentation can come to Fukuoka and talk to the people around me directly. So I like to later talk with individual doctors or professors to seek possibility. Thank you. My name is Yamamoto from the Association of Patients. From the Association of Patients perspective, I have a question regarding the initial or early irradiation. Actually, it's a request. According to the Fukushima's health survey, the initial radiation level was 0.8 millisievert. How many of you believe this? I think it's way too low. Various other data suggest that it's actually much higher. The If you look at other data, for example, from NIRS, it seems that the zero point 0.8 millisievert average was a result of various manipulations to make this level lower. For example, if we look at the total output rate that was injected, that inputted into SPEEDY, it was the former informal the NISA that provided this information, and the NISA's data actually was 1/4 of the initial information. Professor Rosen actually talked about this. Dr. Rosen talked about it, and there is a suspicion that maybe perhaps that data actually went to ANSCAR eventually and ended up in their report. Now, and there's also a possibility that xenon iodide has been, involved as well. So we are amateurs, and there are very little information that we can obtain from the authorities. But the authorities do have the data, and they have released the data, be it the NIRS or be it other nuclear-related authorities. So what we really need is to demand the re-screening and retesting of food items, and I think I'd like to ask for your support, so we can put our voices together. Nagataki committee that we mentioned earlier, of the Ministry of Environment. Within that meeting, there were some committee members who said that they don't know about the initial radiation dose. So some people called for a rescreening. So it's a very important theme. I would like to ask Ms. Yoko Yoshida for comments. I am from the Women's Network of Chernobyl, and I was not here this morning, but however, there are some messages to you that I'd like to communicate. There was an UNSCARE risk communication seminar that took place. I participated as well, and I asked 2 questions. One question had to do with what Professor Tsuda said yesterday, and has to do with the screening effect mentioned in a report. UNSCARE said that of the several thousand cases of cancer, maybe 50% comes from screening effect, and half of it is the impact of the iodine 131. That's what they're saying. The basis, if there's any evidence or any paper, I'd like to see that. That's what the question number 1 that I presented. The second question, when ANSCAR submitted the report, Belarus and Ukraine complained that their own reports that were submitted in either Russian or Ukrainian were not utilized and were not in the final report of ANSCAR. So that was an official complaint that was made by these 2 nations that were submitted to the United Nations. So I asked question, how do you select the document? Do you only select the English language documents or English language papers? That was my second question. Regarding screening effect, they did not show us the actual papers that they based themselves on. They said some kind of answers about in year several this and that years later after the accident they see so this and this cases, but that was not a clear answer. The second answer to the second question was answered by the committee chairperson Click. He said that his answer was a very general one, but he did admit that there was an official complaint from Ukraine and Belarus. And after that, that's why there was Chernobyl forum, and that's why the governments of the 3 nations were included. It was part of his answer as well. Belarus and Ukraine is also a member of ANSCAR, but that's a recent addition. They joined recently. And their answer to my question was that, well, they're now part of the ANSCAR organization. But there was definitely official criticism from these 2 parties. Regarding Fukushima, even though there are many papers and studies undertaken in Japanese, maybe they might not be taken into consideration by the international organizations. In August 2011, the NIRS Director General said those assessment and an estimation of the whole of the Japanese people that was requested by ANSCAR was not done. For people of Fukushima, the Fukushima Medical University and will take part in those assessment, but there is a need to undertake the same kind of those measurement to other people under exactly same condition, and that such request was made. Initially, Japanese experts and Japanese government must undertaking those assessment and those measurement of not only Fukushima people but the entire Japanese people. And in terms of the health checks, that has to be undertaken by the government even for initial temporary period. And that was the decision that was taken, but that was not done. And that's why we only have the data that coming from WHO and ANSCAR. So this was an issue in a way where I believe that we need a movement to really call for the utilization of data that people here, for example, are emitting. And regarding the iodine tablet before March 11th was supposed to be distributed to people under 40 years old, but right after the accident, the within the subcommittee of NISA, um, and they said otherwise. They said that in some papers where Professor Yamashita participated, they saw that there was quite a discrepancy in the results of the health status of people who are given the iodine tablets and who were not given, even over 40 years old. So then the decision has been made to provide iodine tablet to anyone who desires that. And so now it's the situation where it's a new where there is an age limit of 18 in Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and there's a indeed increase in the cancer of teenagers or people who are older, and there are other non-cancerous diseases like the immunological disease. So I think what we really need is a health survey of the overall health, including non-cancerous disease.
Together with those, the incident rate of non-cancer thyroid malfunctions were detected. For example, there were about 7 diseases identified as an increase together because of the increase of radiation. And one of them is the fibroid. Thank you very much for presenting specific data to claim your case. Some people have to excuse themselves at around 5:30. Therefore, while everyone is here, I'd like to ask Dr. Sebastian to give us a summary comment. However, I see 2 people shooting up their hands, or 3 people, or 4 people. Sorry, I have to ask Sebastian to wait for completing these people comments. Can you hear me? As to the internal exposure, there is a civil association, and I'm Kawane from that civil association concerning the internal exposure. Already several people have mentioned. I wish I would have Akiyama-san here right now, because when we think about the knowledge of the low dose exposure, those people should not talk about the risk communication. For example, how much or what constitutes the low dose exposure. If the person does not know, that person should not be involved in the risk communication. However, totally opposite situation happens, and then the lift of a ban of going back to their home towns, such as the some of the affected areas were implemented. And if they go back, the 900,000 Japanese yen per person will be provided. This lift with the off-limit area. Therefore, the compensation will no more available, so it's not a voluntary return. Actually, this is a forceful return. That's why we had to have a discussion about it, but unfortunately, we didn't discuss it. Another point I'd like to emphasize is that if possible, just one person would be suffice. However, we needed to invite a person from Ukraine or Belarus because think about what happened in discussions because the basis is different because we don't get any lessons from the experiences of Belarus. That's why there are people saying that I don't know anything about Lord's exposure. You must have heard such remarks over and over again, but this is totally strange because there is their book issued by the Iwanami overview of Chernobyl accident, and we have to base ourselves on this basic idea presented by this book. If you don't understand this, we are not eligible to talk about anything about risk communication or radiation. For example, microsievert per hour used as a unit of measurement for the aerial dose. It's wrong, as you see. It's not millisievert. Rather, there is the becquerel per square meter should be the correct the unit of measurement instead of the millisievert, and then cesium 137 actually caused the health impact, and then the 55.5 becquerel per square meters has caused a detrimental effect on the health, and this should be the basis for the discussions. In addition to that, on day one, as Professor Koide mentioned, the monitoring area for radiation should not be more than zero point 0.6 sievert per hour, zero point 0.6 per year. It can be converted into the annual exposure estimation. Then we get the number of 1 microsievert, but it's not per hour sievert, just because 1 microsievert is an annual dose. Therefore, zero point 0.6 is an appropriate monitoring threshold, but it's totally wrong on the earlier dose. Natural radiation is 0.04 microsievert per hour. For example, in Tokyo, the average dose is 0.04. Then the 0.13 microsievert per hour should be the control cutoff date. For example, cesium, if there is a 40,000 sievert per square meters, then the 0.13 should be the right number we have to rely on. Therefore, what we rely on is totally wrong. For example, if you go to Kobe, usually you will expose yourself to 0.23 as the natural exposure. 1 millisievert per year is appropriate or not. We cannot talk about, for example, I've visited Belarus. They consider the 1 millisievert by combining both internal exposure and external exposure. The government of Japan just talks about the aerial dose alone, and their number is totally high, too high. And the problem is that we cannot counter argue that because of the lack of the appropriate knowledge about that. Therefore, we have to base ourselves on the lessons of Belarus and Ukraine, and we have to invite someone from Russia, Belarus, or Ukraine, and then we can identify the wrong understanding. Otherwise, our basis is too shaky, and we cannot move on anything through discussions. I'm Shimoda, coming from Kita Kyushu. I'm not familiar to the issue of radiation so much. However, I see the repetition of history over and over again. One of them can be seen in Minamata mercury poisoning. The other is this corporate scandal of the usual. And there are two problems, and these are closely related to other large-scale health detrimental impact, especially the one caused by the radiation. And we see the common points for these the accidents, and I believe these points can be helpful for the solution for the Fukushima. As to the pollutions and the detrimental impact on health were not studied well. This is the first common point. For example, heaviest contaminated area has had a certain level of studies. However, studies are biased, not neutral. In addition to that, under the excuse of studies, some of the necessary studies are cut out, and there is no follow-up observations at all. That's why many problems remain even right now. And then exposure level and individual level, we have to consider the intervisual variation. The level and the situation of people is different from person to person. That's why manifestation of symptoms are different from the mild, moderate, and severe. Timing of manifestation is totally different, and the way symptom is manifested is totally different on an individual basis. But we have to draw the line. The government of Japan has drawn the line intentionally to ignore a certain symptoms, and this situation has remained for a long time. And if you look at the other detrimental health impacts, such as caused by the asbestos, the problem has remained for 50 years or 60 years because the root cause is not resolved. That's why I have to ask you to keep a watchful eyes on what is the government of Japan. Of course, there are many other common issues such as human rights violation, as well as the knowledge transfer from one generation to the other. At any rate, apart from that, we didn't conduct good studies when the atomic bomb was dropped in Nagasaki, Hiroshima, and the same tendency is still prolonged right now. And maybe you have already acknowledged this, but I'd like to take this opportunity to emphasize the importance of the lack of initial studies. And this is already represented by the floppy studies conducted by the IAEA. Even right now, the current condition of the people exposed to the radiation, maybe it will tell what could happen to the Fukushimanians and the 10 years or 10 years. Therefore, we need to go back to the very the available knowledge derived from the Hiroshima atomic bomb. Then, lastly, there are many issues related to the health. Already 3 years have passed. Still, it's not too late to conduct studies in many aspects. One could be the maintenance of a medical chart. We have to maintain medical chart forever. We have to be really serious about it. Speaking of studies under the current situation, the legal mandate to store the medical chart is 5 years and 10 years. However, we live in the digital age, meaning that the electronic chart, e-medical chart, can be maintained forever. Therefore, whatever information available, we have to keep them forever. The most important thing is that that information should be went back to the individual while respecting the privacy information protection law. If there is a request from the individual, then the information on the medical chart should be effectively used. It's not limited to Fukushima radiation issue. Still, as I mentioned, it's very important because we don't know, nobody knows how long this detrimental impact on the health will remain in the future for Fukushimanians. Therefore, we have to think, we have to have such a long-term view. Thank you very much for your precious opinion. Then I see your hands, the person sitting in the back row, and I see Dr. Tsuda and Mr. Habu. You raise your hands, so please follow this order to make your remarks. Since 2011, we established the monitoring office to measure the radiation in Sendai City. As of April, cesium level is 3,702 kilometers away from that, and I submitted this data to the office. However, they denied it, saying that this is the French data. And they said that there's no restriction on the shipment of the agricultural produces, and there's no causality between high level of cesium we produce and the NPP accident of Fukushima. There's an official document issued. Now, Last year and this year, we have conducted a soil survey. Iwate alone has measured the cumulative radioactive substance levels since 2011, and Iwate is the only one prefecture that has conducted that. Based on the ratio between iodine and cesium, we can predict how much iodine was released from the NPP, and we submitted it as a report, official report to Iwate prefecture. And I don't have a data, therefore I cannot give you the exact number. However, you can assume that because of the level of iodine, it's natural for us to conduct the medical checkups necessary. And if you see the data of you at the prefecture, you can tell it. For example, uncooked shiitake mushroom has the level of 7,000. Not only the Iwate, I believe the medical checkups to screen thyroid cancer is necessary for all of the people, and I'd like to support it with the data with the soil studies, and we have to accumulate as much data as possible. Therefore, I'd like to ask for your cooperation on this.
So, the doctors who are here who want to submit something per the food sanitation law, I can send you the format. It's quite easy, so send me an email. I wish I'd said this yesterday. There's one thing that we should think of. Anomalies are already happening. If my recollection is correct, right about now, the Oversight Committee is being held. And last year, I think it was on November 13th last year. No, I'm sorry, it was October last year. So there should have been new data that I would use for the conference here, but they had not even announced when the next Oversight Committee would be. So I didn't even have any material because they were supposed to publish the second round results. Something was happening. There's some kind of an anomaly because they were not sharing the information. So I had an epidemic curve with the number of cases and against a timeline on X and Y. And after year 4, Chernobyl indicates that there would be many cases evident. They always talk about how the screening effect will present more cases, but obviously it's a screening, so you will find the cases early on. There's early detection. So if you are doing a screening of where there are bound to be multiple cases or an increase in cases, then we are now at 3.6 to 3.7 years after the event. We need to be doing the screening now in order to be able to detect anything that would be apparent in year 4. So that means that there should be quite a substantial increase. And in the second round, I believe that they have detected quite a few cases. That's one of the reasons why there's been a questionable delay. When are they going to make the announcement? And when they do make the announcement, will they announce the rather high number of cases? And if that happens, what kind of needs will emerge in Fukushima and the surrounding areas? And when those needs arise, what information do we provide? How do we respond to that? I think that it would have been better if we had talked about that yesterday and today, but I forgot about that. And then when Dr. Tanichi and I were having lunch, I suddenly remembered this topic that I wanted to bring up because we talked about what we should expect. To be specific, if that kind of high number is announced in Fukushima, I asked Dr. Tanichi what we should expect, and he was surprised. He didn't have any answers just yet. But if the next oversight committee is not held for a long time and they keep dragging it out, how should we respond? So, depending on the content and the timing of the next oversight committee, I believe that we need to be ready with several scenarios. We do not have enough time today to discuss, but I would like to outline a likely case and the timing to which I think all of us individuals should probably be prepared to come up with some kind of a response. As I said yesterday, I think that the situation is no longer tenable. In order to hide the truth, I think that the only thing they can do is maybe stop collecting the data or manipulate the data. I think that there are several reasons for that, but I don't have enough time to go over all of that. So, how we react when that happens is something that the key members of the conference should be thinking about, as well as all of us individuals. Happy Island singer. Thanks to my connection with Happy Island, I have now been able to make connections with many people in Fukushima, and I've been able to talk directly with the mothers in Fukushima. I am a singer, so I'm actually able to read the expressions of the audience. This is something that you cannot see. The people who put up a strong front in public will be crying very hard in the audience, or if they come to see me backstage, they share with me things that they say they haven't been able to tell others. What many of them say is that radiation exposure and internal irradiation, they say that it's painful because they are no longer able to speak about this in their hometowns. This is the kind of feeling that those of us who live outside cannot really understand. I am not a learned intellectual, but I have a request to make of the experts here today. Could you please use all of your expertise and vast experience and put it to use for the people who do not have a voice? We would like to ask you to please think about the future. There are people who are very troubled today, and let me speak about what I think is necessary for them. So there is energy that allows you to look forward, but to the same extent, they need some kind of support that will allow them to look back and speak of their weaker thoughts. I think that it is important for you to fill that role. These people are filled with anxiety and they are not able to share that anxiety with anyone because they worry that if they talk about their fears, they will make others around them afraid as well. And I worry about them because they seem to be closing off their feelings. Thank you very much for that precious statement. I would like to include a break at this point because we will have another 40 to 50 minutes as a final wrap-up session. So if we could take about a 10-minute break now. And when we start our final wrap-up, I will ask Sebastian to speak. So again, Hayao-san and Taneichi-san, thank you very much. So let us have a break.